It was Saturday. I got a phone call and I didn't know what the number was. And then I got a phone call again from my best friend, and it was just a text. And she said, "Hey, don't do the Kelsey and freak out. But Nate has fallen at a birthday party at a trampoline park in Los Angeles, and they're taking him to UCLA, and we're going to go get the kids." And Mark, in that moment, I knew he was gone. I knew he was dead. I could feel it. I had been waiting for it. It felt like when she said that, like whatever the last 5 years I had been picking up just landed. And I got real quiet.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know anything yet. But then we got in the car. I was like, I've got to get back to LA. And on the ride back, a doctor from UCLA called and he said, "Mrs. Chittick, I'm so sorry, but your husband didn't make it." And I was like, "Is he dead?" And he's like, "Your husband had a massive heart attack and he didn't survive." And I was like, "Is my husband dead?" And he's like, "Yes, your husband's dead." And so he had died in front of my 9 and 12-year-old at 42.
That's how we got to this place.
That's how we got here. That's how we got here. So that day began what I would call probably the most exceptional, painful, horrible, amazing 5 years of my life. It was my worst nightmare. I mean, I didn't know a life without that man, and he was so good.
Yeah.
And he was our person. It still gets me. But at some point on that plane ride home, I was on the plane and I was hyperventilating, and I knew I had to go home. My kids didn't know yet. And when the seatbelt sign went off, I was throwing up in the bag. This beautiful Jamaican woman in this like gorgeous red and orange and purple dress walked up, and she put her hand on my forehead and her hand on my heart. And she said, "Baby girl, I don't know what you're going through, what awaits you on the other side of this plane, but I want you to know that I'm praying for you. So many people are praying for you, and God is with you. So I want you to decide who you want to be when you land in Los Angeles. You need to decide who you want to be a week, a year, and a month from now, or whatever, because that's the only decision you have right now, baby girl. So take a deep breath, slow your breathing down, and just know you're strong enough to make it." And it changed my life. So I spent the next 6 hours on that plane just deciding that my kids had already lost their dad, so they weren't going to lose me. And 5 years later, my kids are thriving. We have walked through some dark years, and I've had some medical stuff, I think, from stress. But we are back up, and we have made it through what feels like just the greatest transformation of a life.
God, I got shivers just hearing the story of that woman speaking to you.
Yeah.
It's like you never know how an angel's going to show up in the journey, you know?
Yeah. She changed my life. And, I tell people this all the time, but when you're in great pain and great transformation, there are angels everywhere. I mean, that's just how it works. It just works that we are not alone, especially in our darkest moments. And if you can pay attention and slow down enough, because you already feel like you're in an alter world. So start looking for things that don't make sense. And it's so beautiful because you see just the universe or God or whatever your belief is, they send the people, they send the synchronicities. You don't have to do it alone. You just have to believe that there's something bigger going on. And that's kind of what I've clung to the whole time, that early on when I told the kids that he had died, I couldn't figure out how I was going to tell them because they were old enough to, they were 9 and 12. They loved him. Like they weren't babies. They weren't on their way to their own life. We were smack in the middle of like the best part of being a parent. Your kids aren't into sex and drugs, but they can like make their own cereal and, put themselves to bed. It's like the honeymoon phase. But I just told them like, listen, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I've got you and you don't need to worry about a thing. And I said, your father would have never left us if he didn't think we'd be okay, because it's not his style. And I said, I'm enough and we're going to have a great life. So just keep your eye on that prize, and it's going to be rough for a long time, but I promise you we're going to make it out of this. And we all committed to that. And we committed to every single emotion, and still to this day. Now I kind of ride the waves with a smile because I know the ocean now. Like grief is, it is a big ocean. And in the beginning, you are so close to drowning. And I think a lot of people do. And you never get back up. But if you can become a surfer and you start to go, oh, I've seen this before, I can do this. Now I I welcome the times of big grief because I know how to navigate them, and I also know they push me forward. That's how I got here, and then I wrote a book about it, just mostly so my kids would remember my husband and that I would remember, because you start to forget. Um, and that's kind of changed my life. And now the work I do is act as a guide to people that are, 3 weeks to 3 years out of great trauma, because that's a really special spot where the pain is unbearable, but so is the ability to transform into something exceptional.